Andrew with the Weather Service in Raleigh here. I'll be doing the weekly briefing that's going to cover the period today, Monday, August 17th, going to Sunday, August 23rd. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so key points for the week. We're in the dog days of summer, so not much has changed in terms of the heat. Hot and humid pattern will persist through much of this work week. We do have heat advisories out today, and that advisory criteria will likely be met for portions of the area at least through Thursday. I can't rule it out Friday, but at least today through Thursday, it looks like it's going to be probably the more hot and humid stretch of the week. We have a system tracking in from the west this afternoon and evening. That's going to bring a slight risk of severe storms. While we won't be completely storm-free Tuesday and Wednesday, we will see that storms will be more or less coverage. Storm chances definitely decrease tomorrow and Wednesday. But we will see those storms pick back up again Thursday through Saturday. It's looking like there's a more vigorous system coming in right around that time frame, and something we'll continue to keep an eye on as we get closer. With that system, there could also be some severe storms, but it's far enough out that there's not a huge amount of certainty at this point. Next 5 days, looking at the accumulated rainfall, we have the system coming in today from the west. You can see that the rainfall amounts today are going to be highest kind of across the northwestern Piedmont Triad area, and then storms may end up kind of weakening or dissipating once they track east of US 1 tonight. So all in all, the better chance for at least measurable rainfall, basically Raleigh west. And then, as I mentioned, in the previous slide, we do have those lower rain chances Tuesday and Wednesday. As you can see here in the plots, most of the coverage, although it will be isolated, should be focused more in the coastal plain and close to the coast. And then we will see those rain chances pick up Thursday and Friday, especially Friday, where the expected rainfall, this is likely to change, but the expected rainfall could be a half an inch to an inch just on Friday alone. So get all those outdoor things done earlier in the week, like cutting the grass and things like that. So I mentioned the heat advisory that is in effect today from now until 8 p.m. And we are expecting those heat index values upwards of 109. So we always like to stress, be sure to drink plenty of water, stay out of the sun for long periods of time, and check in on those relatives and neighbors who may not have adequate cooling. So we have the heat advisory today, but this is going to be probably, prolonged at least into Thursday. So I'm showing these graphics here, which are the heat risk for today and Tuesday. And this covers much of the state of North Carolina and even much of South Carolina. So for today, we largely have a major heat risk for much of the state, all but the higher terrain in the western part of the state. As we head into tomorrow, the heat risk primarily is in that major to an isolated area of extreme, primarily the Triangle South into the southern Piedmont, Fayetteville, Sandhills, and southern central coastal plain. So it looks like, while we will still be hot and humid, it won't be as expansive as today. And then as we head into Wednesday and Thursday, again, very similar pattern where we're going to see the hottest temperatures and humidity and heat indices from the triangle to the south and to the east. You could basically take US 1 and use that as a marker for where these conditions are likely to be potentially reaching advisory criteria. So again, just want to point that out. Just some outdoor safety tips. May have mentioned it earlier, but just take a, check in on friends and family, make sure they're staying cool and hydrated. Yourself as well, drink plenty of water and stay safe. Know the signs of heat exhaustion, which can include dizziness, being really thirsty, heavy sweating, nausea, and weakness. We have that severe risk today. There is that slight risk, which is a level 2 of 5 for severe thunderstorms, primarily Raleigh West, focused primarily across the western Piedmont, and potentially skirting into the southern Piedmont. Once the storms kind of track east, it looks like they will weaken a little bit, so hence there's more of just a marginal risk for the remaining southern and eastern counties of central North Carolina. We think the greatest risk for these storms is going to be between 5 and 11 p.m., and that main risk includes damaging winds. Can't rule out some hail, but it looks like primarily a damaging wind producer. Tomorrow and Wednesday, with overall decreased coverage, we're not expecting any severe storms, just largely general thunder in the forecast. Here's just basically the 8-day severe weather outlook from SPC, just looking at the overall statewide impacts. So we have that risk today over central North Carolina, and then just general thunder Tuesday, Wednesday, and we are presently not outlooked from Thursday through next week, Monday. It's still pretty far out, so I don't want to say too much, but I wouldn't be surprised if something gets introduced Thursday, Friday, and Saturday with that system coming in, but we'll take a closer look at it as we get closer. Overall, not expecting any flash flood potential today. WPC does include a small area of a level 1 out of 4 marginal risk. That's largely across the Virginia border, and includes maybe a sliver of Person County and a small section of Guilford and Forsyth. Certainly with any storms, we can't rule out heavy rain, but the overall widespread risk of heavy rain today is fairly low, and we're not expecting anything for Tuesday and Wednesday. Looking into the extended 8 to 14 day, largely into next week. Not much of a signal for rainfall, largely near normal is favored, and largely favoring above normal temperatures during this time frame. We're slowly starting to see the downward trend in our average highs and average lows. Greensboro is getting, into the mid 80s for its average high, and 88 Fayetteville, with our lows getting close to the mid 60s, at least in Greensboro, but upper 60s everywhere else. So we're gradually getting into the tail end of summer. We still have September that can still be pretty warm in the last few weeks here of August. So we can hold it in for another month and we'll start to see that downward trend more noticeably. Looking into the tropics, the Atlantic, largely, very quiet. Tropical cyclone activity is not expected during the next 7 days. I did include the graphic here again that we had from last week's briefing because that's very helpful. We are on the 17th of August, so we're still at the very early stages of when activity is really ramps up. So once we get into September, especially mid-September, that's when we should see more or less the peak in activity, at least climatologically. So we're not out of the woods by any means. So always good to be vigilant. And with that, I did want to remind everyone we do have a virtual tropical weather training that's going to take place this Thursday, August 20th. That'll be from 7 to 8 p.m., free and open to the public. Lots of topics that'll be useful for the upcoming season: tropical weather climatology, hurricane center products, all the hazards that end up potentially being issued, so you have all the information you need. I include the registration link on there as well, so you're welcome to join in that. Graphically, for the week, largely talked about severe storms today, with wind the primary threat. And pretty much you can see that there's lightning almost every week, but I do think today and Thursday through Saturday is kind of where we would see the best chance for that. And extreme heat largely expected, at least through Thursday. Temperatures should go on kind of a relative, temperatures should trend downward as we get into the upcoming weekend with right now what's looking like better rain chances. All right, weather summary. So we have hot and humid weather for much of this week. We have a heat advisory for the triangle south and east today. I wouldn't be surprised if advisory criteria expands into tomorrow and Wednesday and potentially Thursday. Slight risk of severe storms this afternoon and evening, primarily across the Piedmont, with the main timing being between 5 and 11 p.m. And we do see a decrease in storm chances Tuesday and Wednesday, but then following increasing Thursday through Saturday. And yeah, and that's largely all that I wanted to focus on. Let me go ahead and